A good midday Sunday. Roger Hill of Wuthering Heights, VELCO Weather Hazards Forecaster. This VELCO Weather Hazards Outlook. We're looking at the big picture, of course, at large. We have this big trough of lower pressure and anomalous cold air that's been basically riding in on a kind of a west to northwesterly wind, more northwesterly here. This upper level trough has been basically stalled over the Great Lakes and producing lake effect snow bands as you get east of the Great Lakes or south and east. Of course, it's all about warm waters relative to the cold air flow, convergence zone setup, and these lake effect bands can last and even move all the way parts of the Northeast and through New England and into the North Atlantic Ocean. This particular trough of lower pressure is now being dislodged and tracking to the north and east, and it's going to leave us with a series of very fast west-northwesterly flow that comes in basically out of Alberta with Alberta Clipper systems. A lot of these weather systems are going to be very fast moving. Most of the frontal boundaries that work through this week prior to Thanksgiving Day Thursday will come through at night, just the timing aspects. Looking at the 850 millibar temperature as aloft, and the reason we basically chose 850 millibars, the temperature approximately the top of Mount Mansfield, that slice of the atmosphere, is that we're getting less diurnal temperature ranges from the maxes during the day and the mids at night. So consequently, this is a steadier state, if you will. So across, you can see that it's pretty warm now, though it's been relatively cold, but these temperatures are actually warming up across parts of the North Pacific again and Alaska. And this has been the case, kind of a La Nina pattern, with a lot of the flow pushing in from the northwest, and the troughs are left out here, of course, in the northeast and eastern parts of adjacent Canada. Consequently, things are going to change. It looks like we're going to see our coldest weather get pushed out, and that is a good thing. We have the European on the left-hand side, the GFS ensemble on the right-hand side, also the European, of course, ensemble. So this is 51 members, and what you can see is a little bit of a warming trend. That kicks in basically on Tuesday next week. And just to run the pattern here, kind of remains with colder than normal conditions across the Canadian Maritimes. But eventually that's going to get pushed on out. It's temporary though. This is our weather system that's going to be developing off the coast on along about Friday. And it's going to be problematic for late in the week and early next weekend, post-Thanksgiving Day. We're looking at a pretty good storm system. Now, with the warmer air pushing on in, you can see that temperatures do warm, but then we get anomalously cold, and indeed, that is the area of low pressure tracking. That could be fairly problematic as we go from basically a rain to wet snow scenario, and potentially drier snow at the tail end of that system. But look at what happens across the country. We warm things up, and we go anomalously warm. Meanwhile, back up near Alaska, they're going to go anomalously cold, so we're flipping the pattern back and forth. So using the 6-hourly QPF and precipitation type, this is valid at 2 o'clock this afternoon on this Sunday afternoon. This is what we're seeing here. This ridge of higher pressure begin to build in, and we lose the lake effect. We have this little system kind of skim across northern areas. It does produce a frontal boundary that works through at night. This is valid Monday night. Then we clear on up. We have an area of higher pressure that's going to control our weather. And it looks like we get another little frontal boundary somewhere along about Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. And that lingers into Wednesday for a time for the next precipitation day, if you will. And then beyond that, things begin to improve as we have a stronger area of high pressure, 1026 hectopascal. But there's going to be some kind of a frontal boundary that's going to be lingering right across this area. And it may produce a considerable amount of clouds despite good dry project weather for the day on Thanksgiving, which sets up like this. This is the jet stream energy that's going to be pushing on in, and there's a couple different bands, a subtropical band of jet, which is also going to pick up some moisture and sort of organize all of this together. Let's run it and show you what we're talking about. So the area of low pressure looks like it heads toward the benchmark, 40 north, 70 west. And then basically, that thing from there goes just about due north as it curls around probably an upper level low that's beginning to cut off in the atmosphere. And then that basically moves off to the east of us. But meanwhile, we cool things out. So we start out from a scenario potentially here with some rain, some little bit of mountain snow. That's valid about 2 o'clock on Friday. And then we go over to snow Friday night and into the day in the morning hours on Saturday before the storm begins to lift out. And then some lake effect to follow it, or another short wave to kind of add a little bit more accumulations. So we have a pretty good storm system that's going to be problematic for utilities. This is going to be post-Thanksgiving Day. Looking at the GFS ensemble centered on Montpelier, Vermont, the 3-hourly QPF, or 3 hours of precipitation, we can see a little bit coming through today. This is our little bit of snow shower and flurry action interacting with the mountains in that gusty west to northwest wind. We have another scenario developing here. You can see a few others. This is the noise in the system, if you will, for that storm that's going to be later in the week, post-Thanksgiving Day, and going into this early part of this weekend. Total QPF, not a whole lot to see here because it's kind of not being registered yet by the GFS ensemble. Some of these outliers, however, are just beginning to start to register, so you can kind of see some hints of something. Looking at the precipitation type, well, first, before we do that, 850 temperatures are all below 0 degrees Celsius. However, the register of that storm system with the potential for warmer than normal temperatures also does get registered here in precipitation type, as we see a little bit of rain with that. And then looking at this is today's winds, with the winds aloft at about 850 hectopascal. The winds actually increase aloft but do not affect us. There's no real gradient wind issues, and this does look to be fairly minor or barely getting near thresholds in southern areas of Vermont, but a pretty blustery day. The winds do come down toward the middle part of the week, and then they start to pick up again, but no issues indicated for gradient wind. And that's snow. QPF over the next 7 days by the Weather Prediction Center, indicating it's mostly in the eastern seaboard or east coast, interior sections. A little bit more processed along the west coast, but in between pretty dry. So our 2-meter temperature anomalies look like that. You can see basically coast to coast cold, but that's about to change with some warmer air starting to build in. How do we know that? Well, let's take a look at the MOS. You can start to see a building warming trend right here, also coming in via the Pacific. And then this is the next 5 days of meteorological output statistics. Only high temperatures is what we're looking at here. We're basically neutral, so the colder air is starting to evacuate. And about 3 days later, we still kind of remain the same with a bit of a warm-up western parts of the U.S. And in terms of gradient winds, 69 miles an hour at Mount Mansfield, but areas of the southern Greens not seeing any gusts over 40, and that's kind of what we're thinking. Roger Hill, Wuthering Heights. Thanks for watching.